Hey everyone, Dave here. Welcome to a new Raid Shadow Legends video. In this video, we're talking faction wars. First, let me say that yes, I know that I realized that my voice sounded robotic on the last shard pool video. There is something wrong with my mic. I'm not sure how to fix it. Even now, it might sound funny a little bit, but I'm doing the best I can with managing the sound and adjusting it while editing. But yeah, hopefully I'll fix it so it's back to being as good as it was before. Okay, faction wars. So this is the Acresia account. If you are like me, you just got your Arbiter and now you're chasing Lydia. So you have to beat all of faction wars to do this. I will release a second video. I'll start talking about factions and good budget options there for each faction. But for now, what I want to talk about today is the 5 most important things when you start planning for faction wars. So, the first thing to plan is where those champs might be used elsewhere. So, if you have a couple of good champs that you're using in clan boss, in dungeons, in arena, and anywhere else in the game, then probably those are your first option for faction wars, and they will be maxed, they will be at 60. Like, for example, here for my Acresia account, let me go to Ogren Tribes. I'm using Man Eater for faction wars. So for clan boss. So he's in my faction war teams. I've maxed Ugo to use in Hydra later on. I haven't figured out Hydra yet, but yeah. So these are two automatically maxed champs. Eurogrim, probably eventually I'll max him for dungeon contents. Again, yeah, just an automatic option here. So we have 1, 2, 3 automatic options, and I just need to figure out another 2 to complete my faction war team. So that's how the first point of how to plan champs that you'll use elsewhere. Okay. Second important point, 50s work fine. And that's even how I did faction wars on my main. Gear is more important. So if you have a couple of level 60 champs maxed with masteries and everything, this will help you either support or do damage depending what kind of champs and which faction. But for the other champs, they can work totally fine at 50. For example, I'll tell you for Skinwalkers used to be one of the more difficult factions because it didn't have all of those good champs back then. So, for example, like while beating Skinwalkers on my main, I had Hovois. He got a 2 random allies revive. So I had him at level 50 in Immortal gear. Immortal Origin will work fine for that purpose. As much HP defense and a bit of resistance so he can support the team. So again, my point is level 50s work perfectly fine for faction wars. You don't need to have 5 champs or level 60s. That's a lot of resources unless you already have them maxed for elsewhere in the game. So that's the second important point, that you can use level 50s. And while doing this, while talking about specific factions, I'll talk about which champs that can be at level 50 and which champs that they are preferred to have at level 60 or maxed out to beat faction war easier. Yeah. So that's the second point there. Third point, and I'll create dedicated videos talking about each type of boss in relation to when I'm talking about the specific factions. When you're building your faction teams, not all bosses are the same. We have 3 different bosses in faction wars. Uh, Let me see if I can bring them up on Hell Hades website really quick. Okay. I couldn't find the boss details. I'll find them for you later from Hell Hades or Ayumi Love, and maybe on the next videos when we're talking about the specific factions, we can talk about them. Yeah. My point is, there are 3 different types of faction war bosses, alternating between different factions there. Some of them apply fear, true fear, provoke. Some of them strip your buffs. Other one will basically exchange HP with one of your champs with the highest HP champ. So this one is very difficult because basically it's almost killing your support champ, and then you get like 12 turns, if I remember correctly. We'll get there when we're climbing higher in Faction War, and I'll show you firsthand how it works. But to beat it, you need, for example, for this HP exchange, you need two support champs. One of them will almost die or will die. The other one will bring it up, and then you have 12 turns to take the boss down before he does that exchange again. Otherwise, the battle would be endless. So, third point, know which boss you're facing and build the team based on that. Maybe I'll combine with that, know the waves you're facing. Because, for example, for some of the factions, you have three Valks on a wave. So you buff yourself, the three Valks hit you with that shield. It's very difficult to kill the other team, and they hit you quite hard. So, in those specific factions, it's better to have either control, lots of control, stuns, sleeps, whatever, or to strip the buffs, the shields, and the counter attack from those Valk waves. For some others, they are really annoying. There's like three Ceciliath on the first wave, so they keep healing and cleansing everyone on the team. So know the boss, know the wave you're facing, and build the team based on that. You might need to change, assuming you will have options, one or two members of the team between like stage 19 and 20, and then going into 21, you're switching a specific champ to deal with the boss. So that's the third important point. Fourth point is manual is your friend. In the missions, like beating level 14 of Faction Wars, level 21 or whatever while chasing Ramantu, or to get Lydia, there is nothing that says you have to do it on auto. When your team is much stronger, when you build more champs later on, yes, you'll auto it for farming. Usually, when you beat the whole Faction Wars, you farm stage 20, unless if there is an advanced quest or something. So, you need your team to be strong enough to do it on auto, but just for the missions or to get Lydia, you don't need to do it on auto. You can manual A1, reserve your, and I'll show you that when we're actually doing it in the next videos. Manual, reserve your skills for when you go into wave 2 or you go into wave 3 or the boss. You don't have to do it on auto. You just need to beat it once on manual, and then you can farm it or drop a couple of levels and farm there or whatever. So manual is your friend. That's rule number 4. Rule number 5, and the last one, probably what you need to do, and I've spoken about this before, is that you'll need a lot of silver, because while it's still early in the game, the perfect scenario for Faction War for your 5 champs is that you have your support champs, your healer revivers, those that are not doing any damage, and either Immortal, 6 pieces of Immortal, or Regen and Immortal. So they keep healing when they take turns, and they are tanky. They have a lot of HP, so they are not getting attacked. While your damage dealers, it's better if you can have them in life steal, so that they are healing themselves when you're doing damage. The main purpose is that to get 3 stars, so all 5 champs need to be alive at the end of the turn, as a round. So you'll have a few good life steal and regen immortal sets, but you might want to swap these from faction to progress. I don't recommend doing this before level 15. Why? Because if your team is not strong enough to beat the boss at level 14 and then start doing those last few stages to get to the final boss at level 21, don't waste your time swapping gear, because you'll struggle on the higher levels. If you've beaten level 14 and now you're getting to level 15 or 16, it makes sense if you have the silver to swap gear, because every time you swap gear, you're giving yourself like 2 or 3 stages to the next time. So it's worth it within limits. Of course, that's a huge amount of silver, so you need to save for this. Or if you're farming gear and you have the gear, don't swap. Keep the swapping to a minimum if you can. But swapping gear and saving silver, probably you'll need to do it at a point in time. Which brings me to one of the videos I released. In the last time, Plarium gave us a free regear weekend. So there was like 2-3 days when you're swapping gear, it's not costing you anything. If you see one of those events coming up with anniversaries or Christmas or whatever, this is your chance. You got 3 days, almost all the factions will be open within that period from Friday till Sunday. Just swap the gear. Swap your best gear. Put it on the champs. Beat those levels. You just want to beat it once for the missions and Lydia, and that's it. Then bring the gear back and yeah, farm 3-4 stages earlier. Nobody cares. So that's the thing now. Let me remind you now about the 5 main points that I mentioned in this video, just to help you get through faction wars. I will be releasing future videos with talking about specific factions, which champs are good there, and about the specific boss for each faction. Point number one, think of where else you can benefit from these champs, because if there are champs that you haven't built yet, but they can be used in dungeons or Doom Tower Hard or secret rooms or bosses on Doom Tower, then those are on automatic 60. You'll max them, you'll give them masteries, you'll gear them properly, and they will help you with faction wars too. So think of where else you can use the champs. Second rule, level 50s work fine. If you have the right combination and good enough gear, you can even do it with 2 level 60s and 3 level 50s just to get through faction wars. But yeah, we'll talk about it specifically, who you can do with this with and who it won't work with. But level 50s can work fine for faction wars. Rule number 3, know which boss or which wave you're facing. You'll know this by trying it. So if it's a difficult wave with Cethalias or Valks, you have to put the right team to beat this specific wave. If it's a boss that puts fears on you, you'll need a cleanser with high resistance. If it's a boss that exchanges HP, you'll need 2 support and you'll need enough damage to take him down before he gets back to that HP swap. So know the boss, know the waves, and build the team specifically for them. That's rule number 3. Rule number 4, manual is your friend. So you can do it on manual, beat it in 10-15 minutes, an hour, doesn't matter. Just get it done once and that's it. You just need to do it once for the missions and for Lydia per the lifetime of the game. You don't have to repeat this till your team is strong enough to farm it on auto. Last rule is that start saving lots of silver, because you'll need to swap your best sets from Regen Immortal and Lifesteal, depending on whether it's support or damage dealer, so you can get through faction wars, unless you get lucky and you have lots of those sets lying around. So save a lot of silver, or look for that very specific window that might happen like twice or 3 times per year, when Plarium gives us a free gear swap. Usually there is like a green sign here. When they give you that signal that we're swapping gear for free for the weekend, use this time, swap all the sets you want at no cost, beat faction wars, and then bring them back to their main champs. So that's the 5 simple rules to start working on faction wars. I will be releasing videos to talk about specific factions, which champs, and how to beat the bosses and levels there. So till then, I'll see you next time.